Hey guys, Sean Pruitt here. I'm going to cover oil and gas, what's going on in the oil and gas industry, and how does that affect oil prices. Right now, WTI crude is trading at $92 per barrel, Brent crude 98.20. Now, if you look at these prices, they don't reflect what's really going on in the world right now. Okay, now you have to understand something. Russia, the only reason why they're getting away with dropping bombs in Ukraine is because they have the most precious, prized commodity that ever existed, that was ever discovered, that is crude. We use crude in our everyday lives. If I had a choice between crude oil and water, I would choose crude because that's what keeps the world going around. Now, obviously, I wouldn't choose crude, but I'm telling you, it's important. Okay. And so Russia, the only reason why they're getting away with destroying Europe in the year 2022, when America has the most powerful military, when we have military presence throughout the whole world, we have the ability to sanction anyone off the planet because we have control. Why does Russia still continue to drop bombs in Ukraine? Is because of oil. Now, before they dropped their first bomb in Ukraine, they checked the oil markets. They did a tremendous amount of studying because if they couldn't weaponize oil, and the way you weaponize oil is by withholding something the world cannot live without. If we didn't need crude oil, Russia would be out of the game. We would have shut them down long ago. China and India would not be buying their oil. Europe would not wait until December. It's like, oh, by the way, we're going to cut you off because you're a bad guy, because you're killing innocent people, moms and children and whatever. But we're not going to cut you off until the end of the year. Just let us buy your oil that's funding your terror organization. Let us continue to keep buying oil from you, and we're going to cut you off, when we get around to it. Okay, look, you can't do that with something like gold or silver. This is something we consume. And without oil, the world stops. And Russia has proven that without oil, the world stops. Okay, and so I'm going to be covering a good bit of news here. The Oil Market Report, August 2022. So the Information Energy Administration releases reports every month. And so I'm going to read a few highlights. Soaring oil use for power generation and gas to oil switching are boosting demand. In this report, we have raised our estimates for 2022 global demand growth by 380,000 barrels a day to 2.1 million barrels a day. Gains mask relative weakness in other sectors and slowdown in growth from 5.1 at a start of the year to less than 100,000 quarter 2022. World oil demand is now forecast from 99.7 to 101.8 million barrels a day in 2023. So we're going to hit record high oil demand, even though that we are in a recession, okay? Even though that the world is coming to an end and we're destroying the economy, oil continues to grow. I mean, everybody expected it not to, but it is, okay? And a big part of the reason why oil demand is increasing is, number one, the emerging markets are increasing their demand. I mean, America has reached their peak demand because we have all these vehicles and we use more plastic than any part of the world, and our demand has been capped for a long time. Well, not capped, but we've hit our highs a long time ago. The rest of the world is catching up. But number two, a major reason of increase is quite simply Europe can't rely on Russian crude anymore. They can't rely on natural gas, okay? In order to get natural gas to Europe, it's very expensive because most of those pipelines run from Russia to Europe. So what is their other option? To convert over from natural gas, over to oil. And so it's not just, and not only that, they're expecting just energy to transfer from natural gas to oil, but also the industries are transferring from natural gas to oil as well, because natural gas prices are so high, it's becoming economically feasible to transfer over to oil. And many of the emerging markets, many other countries are doing this. So we might see an increase of demand by over 2 million barrels a day. We've already seen it last year, an increase of 1 million barrels a day transferring from nat gas over to oil, okay? And so instead of burning natural gas, they want to burn oil, crude oil, okay? And so rising oil supplies and escalating concerns over the deteriorating economic outlook have knocked out around $30 a barrel off oil prices. So here's the deal, guys. We lost $30 off the oil prices. And keep in mind, back in 2020, we saw $30 oil, okay? And so here's the thing. To see any more price fluctuations on the downtrend is far unlikely. As tight as the markets are, as much as oil demand is increasing, I can't foresee us losing any more off the oil price. Okay, we've already lost 30. At the same time, natural gas, electricity prices have soared to new records, incentivizing gas to oil switching in some countries, with several regions experiencing blazing heat waves. The latest data confirm increased oil burn and power generation, especially in Europe and the Middle East, but also across Asia. Fuel switching is also taking place in European industry, including refining. In this report, we have revised our forecast for world oil demand higher for the remainder of the year. So they're revising their numbers. Why? Because oil demand is much more important than what the EIA is telling you, okay? And this is always the case, okay? The EIA is funded by the U.S. government, okay? And so they're about as honest as the FBI. So here's the deal. I've watched a tremendous amount of news. I've read many articles. And so I'm going to go through some bullet points of what is happening in the oil industry, okay? And so OPEC added an additional 100,000 barrels of oil a day increase, okay, to send a message, okay? 100,000 barrels a day increase for OPEC is absolutely nothing when it comes to 100 million barrel a day demand, okay? But it was symbolic just to say, hey, you know, we're trying here, America. I know you're calling us every day. You're desperately coming to my kingdom and begging for oil in an embarrassingly fashion. And so here you go. Here's 100,000 barrels a day. Please keep supporting us as we keep dropping bombs in Yemen. But it only sends the message that there is spare capacity, okay? And here's what, it only sends the message that there isn't spare capacity, the fact that they only increased by 100,000 barrels a day. Now, here's something you need to understand. Back during 2020, when we had a demand of 89 million barrels a day, that because we lost over 10 million barrel a day demand, they lowered, OPEC Plus lowered their output by 10 million barrels a day, okay? So think of it. Back then, they had a spare capacity of at least 11 to 12 million barrels a day. Fast forward to today, they incrementally increased that 10 million barrels a day that they took off the markets, and they added it back to it, okay? So the markets have never been so tight. We have the least amount of spare capacity than we've ever had before. And so that's why oil prices were so low, because quite simply, OPEC could just increase output. And we knew they could. We knew they had at least an additional 10 million because they took it off the markets, okay? And the spare capacity problem, it's quite simply because of an underinvestment problem, okay? You have the negative sentiment towards oil and gas. You had all of these, you had Joe Biden, you had Elizabeth Warren, you have Bernie Sanders, you had all of these left-wing Democrats try to impress their base with making claims against the oil and gas industry, because that was a hot button. I mean, they looked at the statistics. That was the biggest concern. They made it a concern. They made the world believe that the world is coming to an end because of global warming, and if we don't act fast, the world is going to be destroyed, okay? They sent that message. They also sent the message, hey, guys, we have a solution, green technology, the Green New Deal, and here we are. We in a major underinvestment, 5-year underinvestment cycle. That's why we don't have spare capacity. The only thing to do at this point, because we took 10 million barrels a day off the market to help with the oil supply glut in 2020 during the COVID-19 lockdowns, okay? And so we could have easily added an additional 10 million barrel a day to the market. Well, now the markets are very tight. So our only option at this point is not to just increase production from our strategic petroleum reserves or to increase production from our spare capacity. Our only option at this point is to drill. They took the option of, hey, we're going to decrease oil demand and we're going to increase green electricity. And they've been tooting this horn since the day Joe Biden came into office. And look at where we are, okay? We're at $90+ barrel of oil and we are in a recession, okay? And so here's the thing you have to understand. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve is ending in October, okay? The Russian oil embargo is kicking in December 5th, and we're looking at losing a potential of 2.2 million barrels a day. Now, with that said, there's a potential that China and India could just undermine this oil embargo by Europe and simply buy oil directly from Russia, undermining this whole thing. But are they going to be able to place the extra 2.2 million barrels a day? We'll see when that happens. But either way, that's going to cause an uptick in oil prices. In the event that China and India don't undermine the European sanctions, and they actually listen to the rebukes of the world, we can see a massive increase in oil prices. So that's coming December 5th. 3 days ago, Russia cut off 240,000 barrels of oil a day to Europe, okay? They want them to get a taste of what it is to not have energy and think twice about cutting them off. I mean, the only reason why Russia can get away with any of this is because oil is the most precious commodity that ever existed. China is looking to start lowering COVID restrictions. That's going to increase oil demand substantially. Amitra, she's the director of research and energy aspects. She's expecting $120 oil at the end of this year. Iran nuclear deal could add an additional 1 million barrels a day. So essentially, if we have an Iran nuclear deal, they're not going to make nuclear bombs, and we're going to remove the sanctions, allowing them to get their country back in order to start producing oil again, okay? But here's the deal. So some people are saying, hey, we're going to add an additional 1 million barrels a day from Iran. Well, not so fast, okay? So there's a few steps in order to make that happen, okay? Number one, the United Nations. Iran is demanding that the United Nations Weapons Agency must stop investigating their weapons development. I mean, hey, don't look at what we're doing behind the scenes, guys. We have nuclear power, and don't look at our nuclear weaponry that we're looking to build. I mean, that ain't going to happen, guys. And this is the only way to get this Iran nuclear deal things signed. The number two is Iran is demanding that America must make the sanction reliefs permanent. Okay, in other words, hey, thank you for giving us this temporary sanction relief, but let's make this permanent. We'll sign today if you permanently take us off the list of sanctions. That ain't ever going to happen. No country in their right mind would ever sign anything like that, okay? And even if the administration goes for such a ridiculous proposal, they need congressional approval, okay? And also, Iran must comply with this agreement. I mean, and Iran has never complied to anything, okay? And so, and also Damian Kovlin, head of Goldman Sachs Energy Research, he says that demand is increasing from here. The economic slowdowns, there is an economic slowdown, okay? But the oil demand is outperforming economic growth, okay? And so with what you see in the economy, with real estate, with buying, with spending, everything is happening, oil is outperforming the economic growth, okay? And gasoline demand was distorted, and it's being corrected on the higher side, okay? And so this gasoline demand from the EIA those numbers caused the oil markets to drop tremendously, and people were actually shocked. And there were many analysts that were coming out saying this has got to be wrong, okay? And I came out on YouTube and I was saying the same thing. And it turns out they were, and they increased that. But the thing is, the damage has already been done. I mean, this is all part of their plan, guys. It's all manipulation, and so so he's also said that he expects oil prices to be over $130 a barrel by the end of this year, and he still sticks to that expectation. And so switching from natural gas to oil could increase demand by 1.5 million to upwards of 2 million barrel a day increase, which Europe has no other option but to go to crude because they're being cut off from natural gas because of Russia. Last winter, natural gas already increased. Last winter we already increased our natural gas to oil conversion by 1 million barrels a day. So we increased demand by 1 million barrels a day last winter, and that is continue. So uncertainties of Russia's supply. So here's something you need to understand. Okay, so with the uncertainties, with what's happening in Russia, everybody was expecting the Russian oil embargo to cut off a tremendous amount of oil. That didn't happen. They're selling just as much oil as they did before the war. China lockdowns, the recession fears, the green tech promises, all of the new policies in place by Joe Biden, it's causing a mass exodus in oil speculators. People are selling off their oil ownership shares and oil market sell-offs because of this. And it's acting the same way. The oil markets are acting the same way when we had record high oil supply, record high oil inventories, record high oil spare capacity, and we're seeing this oil market sell-off as if it's the last thing they want to own, and it makes absolutely zero sense. Okay, and that's why we've lost $30 per barrel, quite simply because of all the manipulation. Okay, and so all this is going to set us up for the inevitable. And the inevitable is that we don't have enough oil, and oil prices are going to skyrocket. And the lower oil prices go, the lower energy prices go, the higher the demand. Okay, and we never lost demand. For instance, in 2020, when we had all those COVID restrictions, we lost about 10 million barrels a day of demand. Okay, now, can you honestly say that demand for oil increased by 10 million barrels a day? No, we slowed it down by 10 million barrels a day, and it resumed back to normal. Okay, but you never actually lose oil demand. Okay, the appetite for oil is never lost. Okay, it just is put on pause. Okay, and so don't make the mistake that oil demand destruction is here. I mean, everything they've done to lower emissions, to lower oil demand, by putting electric cars on the market, by lowering electricity restrictions on various equipment being sold to homes, industries, all of the policies in place, that has slowed oil demand, but has not decreased oil demand because oil demand continues to grow. You cannot stop the tidal wave of oil demand. It will never be stopped until we create something to replace it. Green technology cannot replace oil. There is no substitute for oil. We consume it in vehicles. We consume it in our technology, in plastics, in energy, in industries, in so many. I mean, all the rubber in your car, in your home, in your devices, plastics, everything. Oil is the most widely used substance other than water. It is the most highest demanded commodity that ever existed. And that's why Russia can drop bombs. And so Putin is going to continue to weaponize oil. I wouldn't be surprised if he rips the rug out from underneath Europe. He's going to try to beat the December 5th oil embargo to the punch because he wants to remain in control. Because if Europe cuts off Russia, if China cuts off Russia, if India cuts off Russia, then Russia is up to stream with no paddle. He is done. But he has done a tremendous amount of research before stepping down this road to start dropping bombs. He is not going to paint himself in a corner. He prepares, he finds out what's going to happen before it happens. No different than some people in office today, which is why they're rich and they take advantage of the situation. But I'm not going to get into that. And so Putin is a very smart man, and he knows more about oil than the EIA, than every administration in the U.S. We are oil ignorant, okay? If we were that smart about oil, we would be producing more of it, okay? There's a reason why we're stealing Syrian oil. We're literally stealing Syrian oil. I mean, Trump was honest about the fact that he's stealing. We're taking their oil, okay? And for good reason. When we spent billions of dollars out there fighting a war that's not ours. And so we have to somehow pay for it. The spoils of war, it's part of the deal. But there's a reason why we're stealing Syrian oil, because we need it. Because we don't have enough of it at home, all right? And so Putin is going to continue to weaponize oil, and he's going to do whatever it takes to keep it as a weapon. The only way that he can't weaponize it is unless oil prices drop down to $50 a barrel, $60 a barrel. In that event, or if we have a surplus of oil, in that event, you cannot weaponize it anymore, and Russia is done. So he's going to do whatever it takes. He has the ability to drop bombs on Saudi key oil facilities because he has Iran in the back pocket, and the Houthi rebels are controlled by Iran. And I wouldn't be surprised if Putin was pulling the strings on that. I mean, Iran is in Iraq trying to control the politics in Iraq, trying to turn them to Iran. And Saudi Arabia is going to do whatever it takes to stop this. Iran is in Yemen, dropping bombs on Saudi military. Okay, so they have a proxy war between Iran and Saudi Arabia. But Saudi Arabia is doing whatever they can in Yemen to stop Iran. Because if Iran takes over power in Yemen and Iraq, Saudi Arabia is done. And so they're fighting, they're doing whatever they can. And then that's why Saudi Arabia is aligning with Israel because to put a stop to Iran. Because Israel and Saudi Arabia have a common enemy, and his name is Iran. But Russia and Iran, they are a common ally. They work together, okay? So Russia is going to do whatever it takes to keep oil prices elevated, because if oil prices are not elevated, it will be his demise. He will lose his power. His country will falter. Everything will fall apart for them. Saudi Arabia is going to do whatever they can to keep oil prices high as well. And so wouldn't it make sense for them to drop a bomb on Iran? Because it behooves them to attack Iran. It behooves them to fight Iran, to not only protect their assets, to protect their country, but also every bomb they drop increases oil prices, okay? So it's a win-win for Saudi Arabia, okay? They're going to do whatever they can to keep oil prices high. I mean, did OPEC Plus not form an alliance to increase oil prices? Did they not pull 10 million barrels a day off the market to increase oil prices? OPEC is going to do whatever it takes to increase oil prices. And for the first time on record, OPEC, Saudi Arabia, said, hey, we don't have much oil spare oil capacity. This is the first time ever, okay? And so the oil markets are the tightest they've ever been, and there's no major oil discoveries happening right now. There's not a major investment happening right now because the banks have reeled their funding back because they lost so much money in shale oil and gas. And then everyone's sitting on their hands because they're concerned. Is the economy going to crash? Is oil going to be replaced by green technology. What's going to happen, guys? Okay, and so they're concerned about it. Okay, and so everybody's looking for a safe haven, and a lot of the oil speculators are pulling out of oil, causing oil prices to what? And so, based on the analyst, they're saying by year's end, we're looking at $120 to $130 a barrel. I 100% agree with these guys. All right, guys, I'm Sean Pruitt, president of Kingdom Exploration. If you like this channel, please subscribe. If you're interested in looking at oil and gas projects, I look at a lot of oil deals. So if you got a great oil program, if it's in a proven area, high upside, high net revenue, send it my way. I'd love to take a look at it. Fill out my form below. And if you're an oil investor, oil speculator, fill out my form as well. I've got a lot of oil programs. All right, guys, thanks.